All right, Dan. Let's get to talking. Obviously,
He's gonna be
this is going to be
so
an
cool.
interesting matchup this weekend. This is going to be an interesting matchup this weekend, just because I mean, crosstown rivals are going to play each other during the season on January 1st, actually. So, who knows how each team will be spending their new year? But let's start off a little bit with both teams. Like I mentioned in the preview, neither one of the it sounds like neither starters will play. You won't see Justin Herbert. You won't see any of these guys, any of the main starters. The one guy I pretty much think we will see on Saturday is Zion Johnson. Do you feel like Zion needs a couple of snaps? I mean, you're an offensive line coach. Zion needs a couple of snaps, right? Or do you feel like with training camp everything's good to go? If he's doing well during training camp, he really doesn't need all that many snaps.
So I think what people have to understand that he still needs reps in games, right? Like the biggest thing is like practice is one thing and the games are totally different, right? Because when you're in practice, you learn the habits of your teammates, right? So it's a lot easier to anticipate things. It's a lot easier to understand where they're going, what they like to do. It's something completely different to go up against a team with another scheme, guys who have different habits, guys who use different moves. So no, 100%, he needs to at least play in this first one just to see what he's got against an opponent in a different color.
All right, obviously this weekend the offense will be on display. Chase Daniel, Easton Stick. Obviously Keenan Allen, Mike Williams won't play. Most
Thank
of the
God.
offensive line probably won't play. What who's a player that you're gonna keep an eye on this weekend on the offensive side of the ball? What intrigues you about or who are you gonna keep an eye on Saturday?
One player I want to see is Joe Reed. He was also drafted in the during the Herbert draft. By the way, thank you, Miami. Got to give him a quick shout out. But anyway, I'm interested to see him because he has been battling injuries. He's supposedly gonna be a gadget player. I don't know if like a Debo type where he's coming out of the backfield or whatever. But I'm just excited, or not excited. I want to see what he's got because obviously he's battled injuries and he's still there. What is he going into his third year or fourth year?
This is his third year.
Yeah. So I'm interested just to see like they've kept him for a reason, right? He's been around for a reason. So I mean, the most we saw from him was some fourth quarter they threw him out there because there was no one left. I can't even remember what game it was. But I mean, we're gonna find out real quick what he has in this preseason game.
Yeah, no, Joe Reed is a guy that, first, like you said, there's a reason why they've kept him so long. KJ Hill, they kicked to the side last year. And now it's like, okay, what are you guys going to do with Joe Reed? What way are you going to use him? They may use him as a gadget player. I've seen that he's been taking kick returns and kickoff return snaps. I'm going to match your receiver with another receiver, Deandre Carter. He's a guy that they brought in from Washington. He's a kick returner and a punt returner as well. But it seems like he's been kind of lighting it up in preseason. He caught a couple of big time passes from Justin Herbert a couple of days ago, and he said he models his game after Keenan Allen. That he feels like he's a good route runner. I think I saw some. I think I've seen that he hasn't really played with a big time quarterback yet. So maybe that's what he's been missing to kind of unlock himself. I know last year Andre Roberts had a couple of good plays in the offense. Yep. Usually they were just end arounds and turn and burn and burn the guy, burn the corners. But I think Deandre Carter could really help on the offensive side of the football. I think that just adds another weapon. And like I've been telling Gilbert, I've been pounding the table. I've been screaming at it. That's speed, right. Speed. These guys need speed, and maybe Deandre Carter is a guy that brings that kind of speed. But Dan, who's another offensive player that you're keeping an eye on?
Well, just real quick to go back to what you said, if he's missing a big time quarterback, fret not, my boy. You've come to the team that is the son of Odin, God of lightning, Justin Herbert. Don't you worry. We'll fix that fast and in a hurry. Don't you worry about that. But another player I'm interested to see is, I saw our good compa, Eric Williams, video about running or fullback Xander Horvath, not afraid of a little contact. I like that right there. We haven't used fullbacks much probably since LT left, but, it's interesting to see that battle between him and Neighbors. Neighbors, I think, has been with the team since like 3 years? He's been there, I think, since Herbert. Herbert and him were roommates. So it's interesting to see that battle right there. Is Neighbors going to solidify his spot? Or what's going to happen there? Because we've seen in years past, like it was usually him or Steven Anderson going in at fullback. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see right there what they decide to do. And maybe they do add a little I formation, downhill running, some physicality, inside zone to the cows come home. We'll see. I don't know.
That's the coach and Dan and Daygo coming out getting.
I want to pound the rock. I want to pound the rock. That's right.
Speaking of pounding the rock, I'm going to go behind the fullback. I'm going to go running back. There's been a lot. Obviously, Austin Eckler is going to be running back 1, but there's been a lot made about who's going to be running back 2. Is it Larry Roundtree? Is it Joshua Kelly? Is it 4th round pick Isaiah Spiller? It's still not known who's going to be that next running back. There's been a lot of positive talk about Joshua Kelly, which hopefully there is, because I remember his first 3 weeks in 2020 after getting drafted, he looked like he might be the second weapon next to Austin Eckler, and then all of a sudden he had a couple of fumbles. He messed up on special teams, but the guy's always had a smile on his face. He's come up to the podium. He's faced us numerous times after messing up, and it looks like he could be having a bounce back season in year 3. So it'll be interesting to see, because that 2020 draft class just doesn't look good right now, except for Justin Herbert, and maybe Joe Reed and Joshua Kelly can rescue it a little bit. But Isaiah Spiller is going to be interesting because he's more of a bigger back. He kind of, I'm not going to say he's up there with Melvin Gordon in the sense of size and speed, but he is a guy that could be a bruiser, and that's what I think the Chargers need. I also feel like that's why the Chargers are going to use Xander Horvath, is to be a bruiser as well. There were times last year where they could not run the clock out. They needed to use Justin to throw it to run the clock out, because let's be honest, Austin Eckler's not a running back that typically can run the clock out. He's not a big bully that can just knock you down, knock you on your behind and run the clock out. So I think they're going to need some of that. Isaiah Spiller seems like a guy. Xander Horvath seems like a guy like that. So that's going to be interesting to see both of those guys. But
100% totally agree. I think some of the best teams, when they get going, like we've seen it with Tampa Bay, we've seen it in New England, we've seen it with some of these other teams. When you're 2 or 3 backs deep that are solid, like can produce, I think that's when teams just go from great to elite, and that just elevates their game completely. That's what I think the Chargers have been missing the whole time, is a bigger back to give Austin Eckler a few plays off just to punish the defense and tire him out.
But now let's go to I feel like, you're an offensive line coach, but I feel like defense is kind of your bread and butter. I think you like having a tough defense.
100%.
I mean, am I wrong in that one?
No, 100%. If I could, well, obviously the rules have changed and we cannot play like this anymore, or you'll be executed. But I love that type of, like, with the way the steel curtain was known as, was, hey, dude, you're going to try and get across the line of scrimmage, you are going to be punished. Absolutely.
This was a tough area for the Chargers last year. And I mean, I know obviously on the offense, we're a little bit more positive, just because you've kind of seen it. Justin's there. That when it all comes together, they should be able to get it together. The only part that the one thing is, I do think that Storm Norton and Trey Pipkins should play, and I do feel like they should play most of the game just 100%. To kind of see what each one of those guys has. But that's the real big question mark for the Chargers, I think, is on the offensive side. On the defensive side, they have a lot of question marks. Can they put this all together? They got a lot of guys. They got J.C. Jackson. They got all these guys. But the thing is, J.C. Jackson isn't going to play, most likely. Derwin's not going to play. Joey's probably not going to play. Khalil Mack certainly still coming off that foot injury. I don't expect him to play. Sebastian Joseph Day, all these brand new guys that they got, they're not going to play. So it wasn't like last year where they carried over a lot of the guys from 2020. They had a good mixture of guys. Here it's going to be like, hey, we're bringing all these weapons, but they're only going to practice, and they're probably only going to play during they're only going to play against somebody else when they have to face the Cowboys in that joint practice. So here is how are these guys going to mix together? How are they going to be able to do? But on the defensive side now, looking at it, kind of what's your area? Because like you mentioned it right now, the middle linebacker. The middle linebacker is it's one of those positions that, like in Brandon Staley's defense, it's the pass rushers, the defensive line, and the secondary is really what shines. The linebackers are kind of they don't need to be that Ray Lewis, that level that you're talking about. Yeah. But what are you looking for from the linebackers?
Yeah, right. Like they're basically there to fill holes and just be sure tacklers in the run game and stuff like that.
And that's the problem that they had last year. They couldn't. Those guys
tackle.
Weren't tackling.
They couldn't fill. They couldn't tackle. I won't say names because I'm not trying to bury everybody like your stooge co-host over there, but that's cool. But But, you bring in Troy Reader, Super Bowl winning Rams. I mean, Zebras kind of help, but I mean, whatever. What are you going to do? You got Amon there from last year. Amon made a couple plays when he was in there a few times last year. I think he registered a sack against the Vikings
Minnesota.
at home. And exactly. The Vikings at home. Delayed blitz. It was a thing of beauty. And there's a new guy, Damian Lloyd, who seems to be gaining momentum and everything. So it's going to be interesting because, the problem is, too, Kenneth Murray, to my knowledge, hasn't been practicing, correct?
No, he had ankle surgery. Gilbert kind of gave me that before we jumped on. He had that ankle surgery and he still hasn't practiced. He's still he's still not working out or anything with the team. So he may be a season decision, not a season decision, but he may not be ready for the start of the season. You just don't know. So they're gonna have to do with what they have right now, and Kenneth might not be back in time for the season to start.
Yeah, so who knows what's even going to happen there, right? Because he's essentially by not getting reps now, he might be, taking himself out of a job right there.
Yeah, Kenneth is not penciled in as a starter. He's a guy that was going to have to come in and fight for his position. Just because last year, I mean, you kind of saw it at some points. They moved him to. It felt like Kaiser White and Drew Tranquil had the partnership.
Yeah,
and they were doing well together, and they kind of had to move Kenneth to outside linebacker. It wasn't working at outside linebacker, and for some reason that we still haven't found out why, they decided to play him most of the game against the Raiders, and he kind of suffered in that game too. So maybe he just wasn't right. Maybe that ankle did bother him because he suffered that ankle injury a year ago during the practice that they had at SoFi Stadium. I remember Gilbert, Uncle Joe, and I were standing right there, and he comes over and he starts screaming, and you're like, oh my God, a man should never have to scream like that. It was just crazy. And then 3 weeks later, he injures the other ankle against the Dallas Cowboys, and it also looked nasty. So maybe he wasn't right and he needed the ankle surgery, but
and he rushed it back. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, and it just hasn't come together for him. So And that's obviously two defensive systems now. Gus Bradley's it hasn't worked, right. And now so far in Brandon Staley's it hasn't worked. So you're at the point now where you're kind of teetering on
this or get off the pot. That's right.
Exactly, but keep on going. Sorry for interrupting.
Just like another first rounder who I won't mention on the defensive side that we all know who I'm talking about. But one person I am excited to see on the defensive line is our bro over there, Fayoko. He's been solid when he's played. I thought, to be honest, the best defensive line game we played probably was against the Steelers, where we held Nosh. We held Nosh to less than 100 yards. They were physical. They were up front. They were getting after it like dogs. They really had that dog mentality, and it was just really great to see. It's going to be interesting to see him. I hope he gets as many reps as he can this Saturday.
And that was a game that there was no Linval Joseph. There was no Jerry Tillery, and there was no Christian Covington because they all had COVID. So those guys had to step up. And Braden's a guy that really has been making the rounds lately as a guy that he could end up. He's pushing hard to try and make this team. I mean, obviously they have Christian Covington, they have Morgan Fox, Austin Johnson, Sebastian Joseph Day, Jerry Tillery, and Braden Fayoko. And that's without mentioning Joe Gaziano, Andrew Brown, and Forrest Merrill. But all those guys are pushing. Those guys are all pushing for a job. And one of these guys is, a couple of these guys, but they're the way the Chargers have done it in the past, they've only carried 5 defensive linemen. So a couple of these guys are going to be the odd man out. But when I look at the defense, I'm going to be looking at who am I going to be looking at? I'm going to be looking at safety, the safety position. Why? Yep. Because there's a guy that I've been noticing. Jeff Miller has tweeted out about him. A couple of people have tweeted out about him. Raheem Lane. He's a safety. He's an undrafted safety. He's a guy that supposedly has been making a lot of plays during training camp. Him and JT Woods are two guys that have been making a lot of plays during training camp. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of what those guys are going to do. For me, JT Woods seems like he's going to be a center fielder. He's going to be dropping back. They're going to try and get him to get interceptions. Things that the Chargers haven't been doing. Last year, they dropped a lot of interceptions, and I hate beating this drum. Our good compa Gilbert had said that Nasir Adderley would get 10 interceptions on CBS. Clearly, he didn't get it. Well, they need somebody who's not going to drop those, and Nas unfortunately would drop them. I think Gilbert and I counted by the end of the season. I think he should have had 8. He easily could have had 8 interceptions, but he had dropped all of them. So they need a guy who's going to be sure-handed. It seems like JT is a sure-handed guy who should be making those grabs. I think his work needs to be on his tackling. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. And Raheem Lane is a guy who they've had practicing with the first team. They've been rotating him, and that's another thing with Derwin not practicing again because of the contract. It kind of gives other guys a chance to step in and show what they can do. But I'm gonna be looking at, and if he plays, but I'm interested to see what Jerry Tillery has. Jerry Tillery, your back is against the wall right now. I mean, literally, there's a lot of really good players that the Chargers have signed. Jerry Tillery has not gotten it done. I think Uncle Joe Reed, he tweeted it out. He has more personal foul penalties than he does sacks. I mean, and that's just the skinny of it. So
Facts.
you're gonna have to he's gonna have to step up. Can he show what he has? Some coaches I think have said that I mean, some of them say that preseason really doesn't matter, that they know basically going in if they like a player, if they don't. So I'm interested to see kind of what is going to happen with Jerry Tillery. Is this a season where the Chargers say, hey, we have way too much talent, sorry, Jerry? Or is this where Jerry's going to step up and finally show the potential that he had as a first-round draft pick? Dan, thank you so much for previewing this Chargers game. I'm not going to ask you for a score prediction because obviously it's
it doesn't matter. We're in preseason.
I'm sure that you're not going to be that hard pressed for this game. So
yeah, no, I got the one I got circled is January 1st when they play for realsies.
There you go. All right, guys. Well, thank you guys so much.